It's on, recording. Am I right in saying it's recording?
Yeah.
It's recording. Okay, recording. Right, 2 seconds. Hello, I'm Hugh Coakley from the Guildford Dragon News. The coronavirus pandemic is wreaking havoc with businesses and shops around the country and, of course, in Guildford as well. Our local authorities have been encouraged over the years by governments to act as businesses. And so, like businesses, when their revenue stream is hit, they are hugely affected, and their ability to function may be affected as well. So, what is the current state of Guildford Borough Council's finances? Will it be greatly affected by the hit to the revenue streams? Will we be getting additional money, additional help from the government? And in all the continuing uncertainty, what options does the government have in view of the reduced income that it has to work with? So these are questions we will be putting to our guests here today. We're delighted to have with us 3 Guildford councillors, Tim Anderson from R4GV and for Clarendon and Horsley, and newly appointed to the council executive with responsibility for financial and assets. James Dill, Liberal Democrat for Westborough and on the executive for the environment, and James Walsh, Labour councillor for the Stoke ward. Thank you ever so much for talking to the Guildford Dragon here today. Much obliged. Right, Tim Anderson, could I start with you, please, and ask you to give a brief overview of the council's financial situation caused by the coronavirus? You know, what extra has been spent? What revenue are you losing?
Okay, thank you, Hugh. Well, the extra spend amounts to about 2.3 million up until the end of July. That's on a whole range of things, such as accommodation for the homeless. They've been swept up and put into Travel Lodge and other places, 56 people in total. Support for the likes of G-Live and Spectrum, food parcels, and a whole load of other things which have been distributed across the borough very efficiently by our officers. Then in terms of the loss of income, that's far greater. That's estimated at 7.1 million. Now, the biggest one of that is the loss of car parking revenue. In normal times, we get about £2 million a month from that. And obviously, all the car parks have been free over this period and will be until the 1st of July. And then there are other things, loss of rent for people who are unemployed, tourists, lack of tourism, sports, leisure. The list is very long. So that's the 2 losses. Do you want to know the impact on our reserves as a consequence?
Yes. Well, what I'm thinking is, do we have a healthy reserve? How long will this reserve last?
Well, we have very healthy reserves at £30 million. 13 of that is allotted to Future Guildford. That's the ambitious programme to reduce council costs and improve efficiency, which is already delivering, I'm pleased to say. So that only leaves you with 17 million of usable reserves. So if you take the 17 million and you subtract the 1.7 million we've lost in income and the 2.3 million extra spend, it leaves you with 7.6 million. We've received 1.5 million from the government, plus another 25,000 from government and Surrey County Council. So the net position that we hope we will arrive at is 9 million in reserves. So this is the rough outcome if things go as we hope. Obviously, we don't know how quickly the income streams are going to come back in, how confident people are going to be to go to Guildford and park and so on. And as you know, on the 5th of May, the council allocated 15 million in reserves for the current crisis should the worst come to the worst.
Okay.
So therefore, at the moment, we've got some headroom, but if all the 15 million were used, our reserves would be very low.
So Tim, you've indicated there's huge uncertainty. There obviously is. We don't know. Nobody knows what's quite going to happen. What sort of length? What sort of period are you anticipating this extraordinary spending and loss of revenue to continue for? What's your contingency in a way?
Well, you know, it's this is the first time we've had a pandemic. The rate of recovery is impossible to forecast with any certainty.
Yeah.
But you know, the shops are opening. As I said, the car parking will kick in on the 1st of July, and we hope, you know, we will be having campaigns to, and perhaps James Steele will elaborate on this, as he's involved with tourism and so on in the town centre. You know, we're going to have campaigns to encourage people to come to Guildford and enjoy the town, but of course we'll have to ensure everybody is kept safe and distanced.
So are you talking about extraordinary spend for another month or 2 months? What are you talking about? If it goes on for 6 months,
If it goes on for 6 months, we'll end up having to create a second emergency budget, as the current one is only sort of designated until the 4th of July. Granted, we've been quite fortunate that in the emergency budget that we put through previously, there was a best case, medium case, and worst case scenario, and we're currently on the medium case scenario. We suspect that there'd be a sort of similar amount would end up being expenditure, and we could cope with that for another 3 months. We know of other local authorities that are in a far worse financial position than we are. We tend to be actually quite well off financially with our reserves, but there's other local authorities. If this goes on a lot longer, then we're going to see a lot of them that we're going to go bankrupt. So we're quite fortunate there, but we could definitely for the next 3 months be able to cope with another 3 months being able to cope if it's on the medium term. But we very much have to see what we'll go going forward.
James, thank you for that. What areas are feeling the pinch in council activities? Are there any areas that you're having to stop doing or make radical changes to, or is all your council services just continuing?
We of course have had to stop. Some of when you look at things like the Spectrum, or the Spectrum Lido, and the facility at Ash Manor for the sports facility there, that's because of the operating contract we have with Freedom Leisure. That has that they've currently stopped operations there. Of course, the Spectrum, which has been sort of taken over by Surrey County Council, with the work of our brilliant officer team, to have it as the Surrey Food Hub, in which has been able to supply really good food packages across the county. Has done a really good job there, and then we've also repurposed the Park Barn Centre in my ward, and then also the Shoreditch Centre in Ash, as smaller Guildford-based hubs to be able to supply food packages across the borough. Of course, we're contingent on what Freedom Leisure as a company believe they can do going forward in terms of to reopen services. We know that there'll be some parts of the Spectrum that they will not be able to reopen because we cannot ensure safety during social distancing. But there are bits that we can look to reopen, and we're working on a constant weekly basis, almost daily basis forward, and trying to create some sort of plan there. Of course, the same as for G Life as well. We basically contingent on that can do things safe.
James, we're losing you a bit.
When we do get the green light back on.
James, we're losing you a bit. So if I could go to you, James Walsh.
Yeah.
James, these are extraordinary times, and it's probably still sinking in with most people what the effect of these extraordinary times are happening. It's still an emerging situation. Are your constituents worried about the council's financial position? Are they worried about the capacity of the council to continue doing what it has been doing? What are your constituents telling you?
Not so much about I've not had any emails or calls about the financial situation. I'm sure people are worried about that. I've had a casework that I've dealt with regarding their personal situation. Obviously, I can't go into detail about the who's and where's, but some serious housing issues, which fortunately we got sorted out. And full credit to the housing team for that. But the sort of the personal impact of this disease is the thing that's still concerning a lot of people. And so a lot of this financial stuff is very much future based. It's kind of, at the moment, people are still dealing with the disease, the fear of it, and that's important. And there's a disease itself, there's also the fear of it and the uncertainty that it brings to people's daily lives, and that's what I'm seeing from people in my ward.
Okay, so people, so in actual fact, your constituents it hasn't risen to the top of their agenda that the council may or may not be able to continue doing all the services that they're doing at the moment.
Well,
sorry.
You know, a lot of the residents have really benefited from the money that we've been distributing from the council, central government money. So for businesses, we were given 21 million, and our officers worked day and night to distribute over 19 million of that 21 million to help support businesses across the borough. And then for the needy that James was talking about and the vulnerable, you know, we've distributed over 15,000 Meals on Wheels, for instance. We've been getting prescriptions to residents across the borough. So I think, you know, that for a lot of people, their response to this has their view of how the council is doing, which should be very favourable, because we've really stepped up to the mark and dealt with the challenges. And that's taken a lot of officers being redeployed across the borough to do jobs they'd never been trained to do. And all credit to them, they've done a great job.
Tim, can I ask you, so you have a reduced income. Are you talking to the government about more money?
Yeah, we've got various ways of talking to the government through the local government association, through the association of district councils, through our MPs. We're trying all ways to bend the government's ears, but we have to say, you know, the government is spending a fortune, and we're not holding our breath expecting to get a lot more money.
You're not. So what are you expecting from the government? Will your additional costs be covered? Will you expect to any sort of capital grants or anything like that? Soft loan?
Well, as James did, go on, James.
Sorry, Tim.
That's okay. You go.
So that's it's quite hard for us at this point to start pinpointing what sort of grants the government could or couldn't create. Of course, we'd very much welcome any additional funding they could do. A lot was promised, especially to other, you know, mainly this is looking at other districts and boroughs that, you know, they could probably only really survive for this 3-month period with their reserves, that would be desperate for the government to actually ensure that they do give a right amount of money to them so that they can continue. But we will continue to keep on putting pressure on, and you know, and my figures sort of backed up by the LGA that are saying that the 3.2 that is currently 3.2 billion that is currently being offered by the government needs to be doubled, to be given to all other local authorities, so that they can keep providing the services and to actually build back up their cash reserves so that they can continue past this COVID situation.
I'm not hearing that. It's not clear to me what sort of impact this lack of this loss of revenue is going to have. James Steele, I see that the National Heritage Lottery Fund has frozen all grant applications, for instance, and that's effectively going to stop the Guildford Museum project, or is it? Will the Guildford Museum project continue?
Freezing the 4 million has meant that we are currently in the process of re-looking at all our, you know, in a general sense, because of a lot of our major projects, we are looking at them all and seeing ways in which things could be either altered or changed, or if they need altering or changing, if they're how far they are down the line. Is very much seeing on a case-by-case basis at where those current projects are before we can make any decisions. But you know, all the projects are being looked at and seeing where our funding was coming from, and seeing if that can continue going forward.
What's going to be threatened? I mean, for instance, will you be making cuts to parks and gardens, for instance, in your remit?
Again, it's too early at this point without us knowing the financial situation that each department's in before we can start saying which areas we're going to make cuts to, or if any areas are going to have cuts to them. We very much have to wait until we are past this pandemic. We know exactly what the financial situation is in each department in all sectors of the council, and then we can push on from there. But luckily, we've done things with Future Guildford. And also some of the contingencies we've had with our reserves, where we were in a strong position where we should hopefully have options that would be available to us.
Okay. As things currently stand, best case scenario, we'd be down to £9 million of earmarked reserves if we spend everything, if everything goes to according to plan now. The safe zone for that is 10 million. We'd like to have 10 million in earmarked and general reserves. So we're already down £1 million. So as soon as this is over, or as soon as we can get into a clearer place, we need to start pouring back some of that money to get the base 10 million, let alone stuff for services. So decisions are going to have to be made. I think, as James said, we're not quite in that place yet. We need to know where we end up after the immediate crisis is over, and then work out as a council. And I would just like to say, I'd like to have residents to have a big say in this as well. How services look going forward, whether that means cuts, whether that means restructuring. Under austerity, when I was a councillor in Slough, there was a lot of restructuring and changes, and a lot of it was for the better, to be honest. But I think we're at a point now where all local authorities are stripped to the bone. Some of the decisions we're going to have to make are going to be tough decisions, not popular decisions, but decisions we have to make to recover from this.
Tim, you're leading on the budget for GBC. What options do you think are open to you?
Well, I think
borrowing. What else?
Well, I think James has already said. James Steele has already said. We're in a fortunate position that we are more financially sound than most councils across the whole country, and so we have a lot of room for manoeuvre. But we have a very ambitious capital spending programme, and there may be projects which we have to slow up on, might have to freeze for a little while we build up the reserves that James was just talking about a couple of minutes ago. But we've got lots of options, and and also on the other side of it, we really don't know how quickly our revenue is going to kick in. If we can get £1 million a month of car parking charges, that will make a big difference. And as the confidence to go back and the commerce increases and people go back to their offices and people go back to shopping in the high street and they go to some of these events we would like to generate to increase demand, then just the car parking will make a significant difference to our income. So we do have a lot of options. Estates like Middleton Estate is currently being refurbished, and that'll be increasing our income later in the year. We own 80% of Slyfield. That's good income that will be coming through. So we have both sides. It's not only expenditure; it's income, and we're planning, and we'll have to keep planning and keep changing and keep adapting as we go forward, because nobody's done this before. So there's no blueprint that we can just take off the shelf, dust down and start following.
A very brief interview this, and we'll go on to the last question to you all, please. 3 months ago, or at the beginning of the year, we had no thoughts of coronavirus, we had no thoughts of lockdown. You, as a council, you may have to make big changes. We don't know yet. It's possibly too early to say. But you may have to make changes, and to what you do, to what you provide, in view of the potential impact on the community. How will you be taking the community with you? How will you be consulting with people? How will you be sort of making sure that people agree with what you're doing? In a way, you don't have a mandate for this, because whoever heard of coronavirus 6 months ago? James Steele, what do you think? How will you be taking the community with you as you go forward?
Key thing, well, of course, first of all, using us as councillors as best as possible, as those community representatives and those that have those contacts in those communities, to put forward the options that are available. Of course, on a lot of key things that will have consultation. These will be thorough consultations. We're working really well at the moment. We're granted, given the current COVID situation, at improving our digital consultation skills. Of course, they will end up being keenly used, but very much the heart of GBC will be to ensure that residents are brought along with any changes that do come along at the end of COVID.
But traditionally, James, consultation is not really well. It doesn't have a particularly good name, looking at the local plan and so on. And when you have a consultation, how many people actually respond? I wonder, is there a need for a different type of consultation? People talked about people's assemblies and citizens' assemblies and all that sort of stuff. Is there something that you can do differently to really bring people along? What do you think?
Very much, I think, as I alluded to earlier, it'd be definitely a lot of people that a lot of residents are very much on online these days and on the digital spectrum, and using that as in a much more effective sense than has been done in the past. I know that whenever it comes to GBC technology in the past, hasn't been entirely great at being able to take down people's viewpoints and bits in a very detailed manner, but that has been improved. The Future Guildford scheme has helped that in a way when it comes to our customer service and our front and our sort of digital customer service. So it'll be a very good test of what the Future Guildford digital customer service has done, that we'll be able to test with that.
James Walsh, is GBC's consultation process going to be up for? Is it going to be sufficient to consult on this massive issue, or potentially massive issue?
I think in part, yes. I'm very much big on the door-to-door, doorstep local consultations. I think too often I've seen consultations happen, not just in Guildford, elsewhere as well, where you get community leaders shouting the loudest. So the people who shout the loudest are very experienced in presenting themselves, leading the way. I'm thinking particularly people in my ward and other wards in the town who have got ideas but don't always have the means, for example, when we work in shifts, to go to meetings and sort of express themselves. And I think what we need to do as a council, and it's a job for councillors in particular, because we do it during election time, is to go out to the doorsteps and talk to people about the issues as they affect them in their day-to-day lives. So don't talk about sort of the high-end stuff. Talk about how the cuts are going to affect them. What they're going to do if they want to take the children swimming at the Spectrum at the weekend and it's not there. Sort of really make it relatable and talk face-to-face. We could do like town hall meetings, but I think the councillors will have a strong lead on that. And I also say that a degree of unanimity among the councillors is pretty much essential to try and take some of the political heat out of this. It'd be all too easy to kind of bang our drums around and talk about the Tories doing this, the residents groups doing that. And I think we need to be a bit more, this is so serious, this is something we all need to come together to tackle and develop. And that's the aftermath as well as the current crisis.
Kim, your thoughts? Is R4GB as a new force? Is it happy to go along the traditional routes?
I wholeheartedly support what James just said. I mean, we've just changed the nature of the way the councils run. We now have a coalition running the council for Liberal Democrats and for R4GB on the executive. And this cooperative approach is the way we want to move forward, and we want to work closely with the other parties. And as James Walsh just said, this is about life and death. This is about hospitals almost being overrun. This is about getting essential food and medical supplies to people across the country and across Guildford Borough. It isn't the time for political gamesmanship. This is a time to be practical, and in the short term we're going to have to work to the best advantage of everybody across the borough, and that will mean a lot of short-term measures, and then as the picture becomes clearer we can have more of a long-term strategic game plan. But in the next month or so we'll be making it out on the hoof. We'll be doing everything we can to promote business across Guildford Borough, get the industry working, and hopefully generate as much income as possible so that we can start addressing the shortfall in our reserves that we've had to give up, but give up in a good cause. That's what reserves should be for times like this. And thank goodness we were in such a good financial position.
James Steele, Tim Anderson, James Walsh, thank you ever so much for talking to the Guildford Dragon today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.